People will stay in roles even though their wages are not as high as when they get elsewhere, because they like the people and because they like their manager and they feel like they are valued. People often leave companies as well because of their own direct line manager. So how great are your line managers at managing people with a real focus on development?
Delivering the best results means attracting and developing the best talent. But how do you turn your employees into strong leaders who are proud to work for your business? And how can you navigate tough decisions without affecting employer reputation? Joining me today on All About Business is Steph Rix. Steph is the founder and managing director of Life's Work, where she provides team, career, and leadership coaching for businesses and individuals. Steph has a master's in career development and has been an executive coach for almost 10 years now.
You could look at a dictionary definition, couldn't you, of what makes a great leader. It's not just about leading people, it's also about leading yourself. How self-aware are you? How resilient are you? How well do you know your strengths, your values?
I would agree, value is so important, and this is something we talk about quite a lot in business.
Deloitte, McKinsey, Gallup have all done quite a lot of research on this, on where you invest in performance and people, you tend to get companies that are more profitable. So you kind of drive commercial success through the people.
A lot of business leaders have sort of scarce resources, times are quite tough. What would you say to them if they're thinking of scaling back this type of support?
Welcome to All About Business with me, James Reed, the podcast that covers everything about business, management, and leadership. Every episode, I sit down with different guests who've bootstrapped companies, masterminded investment models, or built a business empire. They're leaders in their field, and they're here to give you top insights and actionable advice so that you can apply their ideas to your own career or business venture.
Steph, thanks so much for joining me today.
Pleasure to be here.
Now, you are an executive coach
Yeah.
and managing director of your own company,
Yeah.
Life's Work, which you started almost a decade ago now.
Yes.
Part of your work, as I understand, is turning workers into leaders or
Yeah.
employees into
Yeah.
leaders.
Yeah.
What does that involve typically?
I think, you could look at a dictionary definition, couldn't you, of what makes a great leader. And I think it's not just about leading people, it's also about leading yourself. So whenever we start any leadership development program, we start with, how do you actually lead yourself? And I mean, how self-aware are you? How resilient are you? How well do you know your strengths, your values? What do you, like you talked about, brand me, what do you stand for? So I think that's definitely the first part of it. And then it's about, in leadership, how are you then, because we talk about the difference, leadership versus management, and we'll say, managers will lead tasks, leaders lead people. And so it'll be around, how are you motivating and inspiring your team? How are you coaching them? How do you handle difficult conversations? How strategic are you thinking? How long term are you thinking, and short term? But all with the main focus of it's about people rather than things.
Some people think that leaders are sort of born, not made. That they emerge, from the womb with this sort of charisma or sort of followership or something. Is there any truth in that? Do you believe that?
No.
You don't?
No. I think there's...
Why is it so persistently in our culture that people think leaders
I think there are certain traits that some people have. And maybe in the past, there'd be traditional, quite direct presence, command, like this kind of style, that people then say they're a natural leader. So I never thought of myself as a leader because I didn't fit that mold. So I was, in an organization, people always said to me, "Oh, Steph, you lack a bit of confidence," these kind of things. Really unhelpful to say that to someone when they lack confidence. It's probably the worst thing you can say. And what around
should you
me.
Say to someone who
You would,
as a leader?
Well, if I notice one of my team are lacking in confidence in something, I wouldn't say, "Oh, you need to have confidence." I'd find out what it is that gives them confidence. So I'd say, or if I notice where they are confident, I'd say, "I really liked how you delivered that part of the presentation," or "I noticed you were really in flow when you were." So I'd pick out things where they are showing their confidence. And I'd also ask, what helps you to feel more confident? rather than kind of stating something like that.
Right.
But I never thought of myself as a leader. I said, I'm a great follower, I'm not a leader. And now I am a leader. But you can learn it, you can work at it. There are skills. I mean, there's countless resources, both paid for and free, that you can access. And for me, being a leader is about having an approach and an attitude of continuous learning. Like I'm constantly learning. I get things wrong all the time, but I am constantly learning how, whether it's through books, podcasts, just meeting people, speaking to people in my network who inspire me. I think it's an approach and an attitude.
So there are different types of leadership. So yours is a sort of open-minded style.
I mean, everyone has their own individual style. I wouldn't say any style is wrong or right. It's about leveraging your own strengths in that style. I'm quite like, as you say, open-minded lead. People probably say I'm quite nurturing. Connection is one of my values, so I believe in connecting people together. And I also need to sometimes be direct and challenging. They're the bits that don't come as naturally to me, and I've had to work at those. Now, other people, maybe you, James, might have that as more of your natural style.
What do you mean?
but then you might have had to, there'll be other elements of your leadership that you think, I've had to work at those. It's different for everyone.
Yeah, I would agree with that. So when you talk about leading oneself, in a sense, then we all have to be leaders.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
everyone is a leader.
Exactly.
Because we all have to lead ourselves from dawn until dusk or whatever, and through the day, and as effectively as we can. So it's a skill that we all need to learn.
Yeah.
And then, assuming we can lead ourselves to a degree, then we can start potentially being a leader in other ways.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, well, I think whether
everyone has that capacity.
Everyone has whether people want to. So I think
they have that ambition or desire is another thing.
And that's okay. There are some people in organisations that don't want to lead other people, and then they're pushed into that as a direction when they don't actually want to. They're quite happy, being maybe a function area expert, for example. There'll always be self-leadership elements involved in that, but they may not want to develop other people, and that's okay.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Okay. On the sort of nature of leadership, you talk about values leadership. Mm-hmm. Can you tell me what that's about? What do you mean?
I'm a very values-driven person. So when I'm talking about values, I don't mean words on a website as such. I'm talking about statements, principles, guiding compass. That's probably the best way of describing values. And for me, I find that if you can make decisions based around your values, it makes life a lot easier, and it's just really authentic, because you think purpose is why we do something, isn't it? And then you might have, as an entrepreneur, business owner, you'll have goals, vision, ambition, for example. But the values tell you then how, because we could take our careers or businesses in so many different directions. However, how do you know what is the right direction to go in? And that's where values can really help you make decisions. So just to give you an example of that, to bring it to life, when I set up the business, I could have been Steph Rix coaching, for example, but I always had this vision that I wanted it to be more of a team. I wanted to have other people working with me. I wanted it to grow into something, which is why I then thought I'm not just going to go down the freelance type route. I'm going to go for the more business type route, because connection as a core value is really important to me. So I made that decision based on values, connecting people, having we cover teams, team development, leadership development, and career development, and it's about how those three things connect. Again, that fits with our values. We had with team, we created,
founder,
exactly. So the values obviously are going to influence the organisation. Yes, yeah.
We're delighted that you're watching this episode. Please hit the subscribe button if you'd like to receive more insights and actionable advice that will help your business and or career.
So it sounds to me that you are very intentional about identifying what your personal values are. Is it a long list or a short list, or is it just connection? I mean, how does that work?
I think most people tend to have around 4 or 5. When we've got our course, haven't we, where you can identify your values, and most people tend to have around.
You have a workshop on that subject. I remember Life's Work is the course. It's really good. Steph led it. Yeah.
We've got most people have 4 or 5 core values. So connection is really important to me. Creativity, courage, and contribution. Making a difference. So I always think
they all start with C.
They are. That's my marketing background, James.
Right. That helps remember it, I suppose.
Yes, the 4 C's, and with that, but I think it's really important that you're intentional about the behaviours that match the values. Because I know you have fair, open, honest, take accountability are all part of your
the Reed values, and they're sort of our family values. We're fair, open, and honest. That's one. Yeah. It's a lot of more words in one. Yeah. We take ownership and we work together.
Yes, and
that's easy to remember. And they do really inform how we go about things.
I think it's good to almost measure how are your behaviours aligning with the values. So people that are working for you, for example, how much are they embodying those values in every single behaviour? I mean, we don't always get it right, and we have bad days.
No, not only them, but me as well.
Exactly.
Am I being fair?
Exactly. It's almost like I use them as a bit of a checklist sometimes for myself. I have them on a Post-it on my laptop, and if I'm making a decision on, do we want to work with this client? Does it fit with our values? Do we want to take on this piece of work? How am I going to develop the team? What am I going to do? I do think of it in terms of, maybe that makes me a bit strange, I don't know, but I do think of it in terms of, does this match my values? What are the behaviours that I'm showing that match my values? Am I living those behaviours? As a bit of a check, how can I live them more? How can I be more courageous in what I'm doing? That's one of our values.
So how do you help your clients deal with that voice of self-doubt? Which we all have.
Yes, everybody has it. That's the first thing to acknowledge. So quite often clients feel reassured when I obviously I don't share confidential things, but when I share, when I'm working with other people and how people who they would never think of have self-doubt do have self-doubt. Everybody has it. I think there's certain exercises you can do, which we've got on our course again.
But I mean, a degree of self-doubt's not a bad thing,
it's good.
Is it?
Yeah.
I mean, it's quite good to be sort of thoughtful and learn.
I think it's about embracing self-doubt, not trying to shut down the voice, because you can't turn that voice off if you are somebody who has a strong inner critic or doubts themselves. And actually, it can serve you quite well because it makes you constantly want to be better. And that's really what the inner critic or the self-doubt voice, it gives you that, I want to be better, I want to learn something. So I tend to embrace it, but then balance it out and then say, so if I'm doing a thing, I'm saying, what if it all goes wrong? What if I never manage to grow the business? Or if I have all these negative what ifs going on, I'll then balance it out by saying the positive sort of inversion of that. So what if it all does work out? What if I can grow the business to meet the target that I've set? What if we do some amazing work with a great team? And just doing that little, I mean, there's countless exercises that you can do, but again, it's about being more intentional about working through that voice.
So just inverting it.
Yes, yeah. And I think it's about also reflecting back on your past achievements and things that you never thought you'd be able to do, and how you've overcome them. So doing a little journey mapping exercise of what you have achieved can be really helpful for people with confidence as well.
So the things I hear about a lot are imposter syndrome in leaders. And the other one is sort of overthinking.
Yes.
Do you come across those a lot?
All the time.
So
yes.
A bit of advice on each.
Well, I don't like the term imposter syndrome because it makes it sound like a medical illness or something, which it's not, because it's imposter phenomenon. Well, you meant imposter phenomenon, but that's actually quite difficult to say. So I say imposter voice. Right. So I often see these things on Facebook or LinkedIn saying, we will help you get rid of the imposter syndrome. You'll be rid of it forever. And I'm like, really? I don't believe that. And so I actually go a bit of the opposite approach and think, actually, why don't we just embrace that voice and actually be a bit more playful with it? So and some people give the imposter voice a name. So this might be a bit over. So I was going to ask this. Mine's called Steve. I don't know why.
I'm going to call mine Beryl. I've just decided.
Steve is my imposter.
He already sounds like a loser.
I know. Steve's really horrible. Steve's very critical, and he will be. And then I have so when I hear Steve going with, how are you actually sat on this, chair speaking to James Reed, doing or whatever Steve might be saying, I will then, Mo is then my kind of voice of inner mentor voice.
Oh, so you've got quite a few.
I want to hear
Steve and Mo then have
so
Steve Mo and Mo challenges Steve.
Yeah, and Mo will say, you deserve to be here. Look at what you've achieved. You are, you're on a journey, or whatever a kind inner mentor voice would say to you. So that,
you have
that
a referee, is that you?
and then you balance those out.
Like, any other voices?
Steph, and then Steph.
I think this is inspired. I love the idea of having these personalities.
Yeah, I've heard. I know
listen to them and drop it and carry on.
Yeah. So there's that's one technique, and then just so it's about embracing it, really being a bit playful with that imposter voice rather than just trying to shut it out. And I think it's okay to have self-doubt, bit of imposter syndrome, as we call it.
It's almost becoming fun in the way you
exactly. And then it's about not letting that prevent you from taking action. I'm a big action taker, so I have self-doubt all the time, but I think I have a strong inner sense of belief in myself, but I have the outside, a lot of like self-doubts going on at the same time. And I just try not to let that prevent me from taking action, because actually by the process of taking action, it helps to get rid of the self. I think there's a quote, isn't there? Inaction is the biggest breeder of self-doubt.
Right.
And so when I'm working with clients, helping them, so small step actions, just if you feel like you have control over something, can help with that self-doubt.
So then that leads into this sort of overthinking, which is probably related to inaction.
Yeah, exactly.
Sort of some sort of paralysis of analysis, as they call it. Talk me through that and how do you deal with that?
Well, so quite often, I mean, this happens a lot with the people I'm working with, particularly on a one-to-one level. And the reason why they want to work with me is because I help them organize their thoughts. And so people will overthink and
what does it mean, overthinking?
Overthinking.
It's a word we hear a lot of phrases.
I think overthinking is where you have an inability to take action because you're constantly in your head weighing up all the different possibilities, the what ifs, the risks of doing something. Certain people have a tendency to do that more than others. So you have some people who are not overthinkers, they just get on and do it. Other people,
that can be bad too.
Yeah, exactly. So there's pros and cons. There's pros and a little bit of thinking is probably useful.
It's usually a good idea. Yeah. So it's when it's
a little bit of thinking is probably useful, but but with overthinking, I would define it as overthinking that prevents you from taking some kind of action, next step, and getting real stuck and not being able to see the wood for the trees. And quite often my clients will describe me as a thinking partner. People have used that phrase about me before. So we'll work together, we'll think something through together by me asking questions, getting them to reflect, see it from a different perspective. And then we'll think about, okay, well, what options do you actually have with this challenge, this issue? And then we'll work towards, okay, well, what steps are you actually going to take? And I think when you've got some steps or actions to take based on that problem, it can be the smallest thing. It doesn't need to be a huge action. It's just a small first step that can help you get out of that overthinking cycle.
That's interesting. So the other big theme that you deal with, like I understand, is change. And change is all around us. Mm-hmm. Change is accelerating and ever present. And kind of often we don't like it very much, do we? It might be nice to go somewhere different for our holidays, but change in the workplace can be quite sort of disorienting.
If you're not driving it yourself.
When you're just being sort of moved around. Yeah, especially if you're not driving it yourself. So how do you help people with that?
You mean organizations, or do you mean individuals?
Both, really. I mean, I suppose I was thinking individuals. So you're if you're coaching or supporting a team that's going through transformational change that's in the market
I
or company.
think I think one of the problems is that when companies are going through a lot of change, it might be like a restructure, it might be a new system being put, whatever it is, that sometimes they forget that how it actually affects people, because the companies are just teams of people after all. And as individuals, as humans, our brains are not really wired for change. We have a tendency to not like change. Some people love it, but as a whole, we don't really like change.
People
as humans.
rubbing their hands between. There's going to be a lot of change.
I mean, it comes from like neuroscience, from there's a whole, I won't go into all the sort of background, but it does come from a sort of neuroscience perspective of, if you were to step out of the cave, there's change when, and then you would be eaten by a saber-tooth tiger. And our way our brains have developed is our brain's primary function is to keep us safe. And change poses a risk of sort of the social risk and being almost, out of the tribe type thing. And so our brains are wired to not like change, and we want to feel like we belong. We want to feel secure. And so whenever we're going through change, certain, like in an organization, people will feel that to different extents depending on the individual.
So this is an ancient fear you're talking about.
Yeah, it's part of the way that we're wired. It's what it comes from. And what we do is just try and focus leaders and teams on the more human side of this. And I've seen it done really well in organizations. So whatever is happening, whether it's a restructure, transformation, whatever words the company calls it, if you take time to just help people, you may have heard of the change curve as well, the Kubler-Ross change curve, which is often
Tell me what
used.
it is.
It was taken from the 5 stages of grief. So denial, anger, acceptance, exploration, commitment. And it's been, there's various different versions of it, but it comes from the Elizabeth Kubler-Ross grief cycle. And it's used in leadership development quite a lot. But the helpful thing about that curve is the fact that it makes you think that people are at different stages within that curve. So you'll have some people who will embrace a change really quickly, and you'll have other people that will take time to
still
in the anger stage and in the denial stage. So I think it's about so companies where I see do this well, leaders that do this well, listen really well to the team. They'll make space, make time. That costs nothing, doesn't it? Just listening to people. It sounds so obvious. I know what I'm saying. It sounds really obvious, but you'd be surprised at how many organizations I see that don't do this when there's a change happening. And it's about making that time for people to air their views, being really clear and honest. I think transparency is absolutely critical when you're going through a change in an organization, even if you can't say all the detail, but just being honest about that. So I can't share this with you now because we're still working on it. However, by this date, we will share it. And then you've got to make sure that on the date that you said you were going to share something, you keep to that date. Yes. Even if you can't then share everything else, you still have to do an update on. You can't let that date pass. So it's about that commitment, transparency, and constant over communicate. You can never communicate enough with these kind of things. So I think that's from actually just this week, one of our teams gone in working with leaders to help their teams work through the change curve, taking practical examples, working through potential ways they can develop their team, take their teams through the change curve. So it's happening a lot at the moment. And it's similar for individuals. So quite often individuals will come to us because they want to make a change. And I'm a great believer in anything is possible. I think I've come from a family who always inspired me from doing things. For my mum, who became a GP, immigrant family, Greek Cypriot, a woman in I guess the early 70s, not many female doctors around that time with a foreign name, and she was like, I want to be a doctor, and that's what she did. She had to redo her A-levels a few times to actually do it. And then my dad changed careers numerous times, from a tube driver to washing dishes in a tea shop, to then becoming a sports agent and bringing football players to this country. and then becoming a lawyer. And my brother as well did. He was doing a geophysics PhD, dropped all of that to become an actor and a comedian. So I think I've always been inspired by people changing.
I mean, there've been living examples of this. People who
so I believe I've seen it, and I see it with my clients as well. I was one. I remember one person I was working with. She was an MBA student. She was a singer, a jazz singer in hotels. She's now a sort of senior consultant for a big consultancy firm. So I see that all the time. Does she
still sing occasionally?
She does still sing. I
think that's a useful skill.
It was really,
whatever you're doing in life.
I just find it fascinating and rewarding seeing people go through that. And it's not an overnight thing. It's a stepping stone approach. And I think with all change, whether it's in an organization or whether it's your own career, it's about taking it step by step. And actually that's where coaching can be really helpful, is helping you to see what those steps are and helping you all the way through that journey.
So what about businesses when they mess up change? What can we learn from that? Or how would you advise companies, because we don't get it right all the time, do we? And things go wrong, people lose their jobs.
Yeah.
It hits the fan, as they say.
Yeah.
So how do you sort of embrace
I think,
all of that?
Well, firstly, vulnerability to actually acknowledge that is really key. Now, some people would find that, but is that, we need to show that we're strong and we need to show that we knew what we were doing. So I think actually if you can...
You think that's wrong, to be strong?
I think you need to be strong, but you can be strong and vulnerable. It's not an either or.
Okay, that's interesting. So how do you do that?
So you are honest about the mistakes that you've made. And I've seen people do this really well. I say, look, we got this wrong. Okay, we acknowledge we got this wrong. This is what we learned from it. I don't think you can carry on saying we got this wrong and then not say anything else. I think but it's important to say we got this wrong. This is what we've learned, and share that with people. Like, this is what we've learned. We're now and then we need your views, and actually making that more of a co-creation of a path rather than just the senior leadership team coming up with all the ideas. Actually, you make that more of a dialogue and saying, let's hear your views. How can we change this? And then co-creating something together to come up with a way of then working through the whatever has hit the fan to get through it.
And you've seen that good examples of that, and I guess bad examples.
I've seen bad examples. Yeah, I'm being careful. I can see the companies and the people.
I'm not going to
name any.
No,
I've seen.
How do they play out? How does it play out when it goes wrong? Then
people leave.
Yeah,
that you have like mass exodus of
and a lot of damage to your employer brand.
Employer brand. People leave the company. Commercial results go down as well. So there's all of those things.
So this difficult conversation, I love this. How to have a difficult conversation. What sort of advice would you give someone who has to give someone some difficult feedback? How do you go about that, or what way should we approach that?
So there's different types of difficult conversations.
Yes, go on, talk me through those.
So if you're talking about giving difficult, if it's about constructive feedback.
So you have a colleague who has body odor.
Okay.
But this is a real problem. How do you surface that subject in a way that, is this? I mean, it's not an unusual situation. I mean,
I have had someone who's gone through this.
So what was the?
So they and it happens more often than not.
It happens a lot.
It happens, and I think, well, obviously, in this particular case, like you're talking about, sensitivity, obviously. So you would take someone to one side. I think you have to be honest. I don't think you can sugarcoat it. And a lot of people, when they're giving difficult feedback, whether it's about body odor or performance, whatever it might be, will do what we call. I don't know if I can say this on the podcast. The shit sandwich.
What's that? Yeah, talk us through it. I mean, this is our podcast. You say what you like. It's free speech.
So so where you say something nice at the beginning.
Oh, I see.
And then you kind of do the shitty part in the middle, and then you kind of try and make up for it by saying something nice at the end. Personally, I don't like that approach because you're then just trying to hide the bit in the middle. And I think it's just better to be really to be upfront and honest and say, look, we've had some feedback on this. This is, and if there's the classic, if it's performance related, there's the classic standard behavior impact. This is the standard we expect. The behavior you are showing is this. The impact of that behavior is XYZ. It's quite a nice framework for doing that. You could probably even apply that to the body odor example. We have an expectation that everyone feels that we're as an office, it's not going to disrupt other people. It's not going to put people off. These are certain hygiene standards that we have in the office. We've had some feedback on that. We've got some odor coming from you, and the impact of that on people is it's making people feel really queasy. I'm kind of joking a bit in using the example, but I think it's about. So obviously you're going to be sensitive. You're going to not do that in a public forum. Obviously, you're going to take someone to one side.
In my experience, a difficult conversation, I think it's good to get to the point right at the start.
Yeah. And there's different types.
You can't say, "Oh, how are you?" and do you have a nice weekend, and then X, Y, Z.
Yeah. You'd say, look, I've got something that I need to talk to you about. It's quite sensitive, or so I think it's about being honest. And there's the other types of difficult conversations is where you're not getting on with a colleague, or they've done something that's upset. I have a lot of people talk to me about those kind of things, or they need to address a certain issue with their manager, their peers. I think, especially if
it's with a superior.
Yeah, it's difficult. Yeah, so there's a really good book actually, Crucial Conversations. I can't remember the name of the authors because it's about 3 different authors, but there's a framework in that, and it always starts with understanding the other person's perspective first. So our tendency to go into a difficult conversation when it's something like that will be to offload and say, look, I'm really unhappy about this, you've done this, or whatever. If it's your manager, senior stakeholder, you might not.
That's what I meant by superior, not they were superior in any other way, just senior in rank in the business.
You might find it more difficult to put it in that way, but you still need to say something. And actually the best starting point is to actually say, look, I've got something to talk to you about, but actually ask them what's going on for them first. So see it from their perspective first. So I once had someone who was really struggling actually with their CEO actually, and I'm being careful not to use names and companies as I'm playing through the example. And he went to the CEO and said, look, I'd like to talk to you about this, but approach it from a how can we work better together? So it's not like this is about me or this is about you. It's about that connection between us. And the starting point is like, I've noticed, so you might notice that I noticed you seemed really angry in that meeting. So you notice a specific behavior. So you might start with that. And then you say, what I want for us, and you think about what you want for the relationship. What I want for us is to be able to work really well together and show a united front. And then you ask them to start, what's your view on this? And interestingly, in that conversation, when he went to the CEO then got really upset, and all of this stuff came out. Stuff was going on for this CEO that he had no idea about, absolutely no idea. Stress, all sorts of some personal things and some professional pressures as well, and that just massively cleared the air. He didn't then get to put forward all the points as to why he was then, but it just cleared the air. So just by pausing and approaching it in a collaborative type way, how can we work better together, and then giving the other person time to just listen, put yourself in their perspective. It just helped to clear the air. Things are a lot better in their relationship now. And interestingly now, he doesn't find those kind of conversations difficult anymore now. He's a lot better at sort of going and saying, look, here, this is what I need. We need to improve this together. He finds it a lot easier now because that kind of broke the ice.
So a lot of business leaders have sort of scarce resources. Times are quite tough. what would you say to them if they're thinking of scaling back this type of support?
You mean people development support?
Yeah.
It's tricky. So obviously, I would think it's a bad idea.
What's scaling back people development?
Yeah, because it's short-term thinking, and it can have long-term adverse effects. In fact, there's actually been quite a lot of reports. So Deloitte, McKinsey, Gallup have all done quite a lot of research on this, on where you invest in performance and people, you tend to get companies that are more profitable over. So you kind of drive commercial success through the people. And so there's always a big risk if you then think, well, budgets are scarce, we need to then cut a leadership development program, for example. But then obviously you might just not have the cash flow to be able to, you might want to do it, but you just don't have the resources. And so I think you have to then be really creative about how you have to keep people development going in some shape or form. You may not have a huge budget to do a, like 100K big leadership development program, for example, but then it's about equipping your leaders to be able to have great career conversations, for example, with the team. That costs nothing. Like, so time, it's just about having some great questions that you can ask team. How are you measuring that? How are you governing the fact that your leaders are speaking to their team members about their development? So there's you can always do something, is my view. I think it's very risky to cut all people development. You don't have to. I mean, when we're working with clients all the time, we'll have organizations, we get budgets cut all the time. And we'll say, actually, Steph, we've now only got a budget of this. What can you do for that? We'll always come up with a creative way of trying to do the best we can with what resources you have available. And there's a lot of free resources around as well. I mean, so I think it's about being very intentional in keeping the focus on people development, regardless of how much money you have to be able to do that.
So a sustained interest.
Absolutely.
In the people in the organization.
Yeah, it's about thinking about people. It's about really acknowledging them. It's about making them feel valued. People leave companies because they have a values clash. B, they feel like they're not being developed, or they want a new challenge. I mean, sometimes people
they
do
leave
that
for more money. Often,
yeah,
huh?
or more
we know
money.
That because we see that.
Yes, or more money. But it's usually might be a combination of factors.
If you're an employer and you're not really able to give people much more money because your business can't afford to.
Yeah.
What can you do in place of it that would keep people engaged? I mean, that's very much your.
Yeah. So it's what are they? So how are you then? How are they then feeling fulfilled in their role? So if, say, your wages aren't the best, what is it then about your company that makes people want to stay there? Is it the people that they interact with? Is it that you have cake Fridays? I don't know. So is there some kind of engagement type things that keep people in the organization? Is it the people often leave companies as well because of their own direct line manager. So how great are your line managers at managing people with a real focus on development? People will stay in roles even though their wages are not as high as where they get elsewhere, because they like the people and because they like their manager and they feel like they are valued. If people feel like they belong, you don't necessarily have to be getting the best wage. If you feel like you belong, if you feel like you're being fulfilled, and if you feel like there is some kind of development and it's leading somewhere, people will forgive the fact that the wages are not the highest. So it's a constant kind of juggle between all those different factors, but really focusing on the belonging, the engagement, feeling like you're being developed, like you're cared for. I mean, you use the term co-members, don't you? Feel like you're part of something, you want to feel like you're a member of this organization.
So people want to feel part of something. And
yes.
The belonging points really.
Yes.
And that goes very much with inclusion, which we've been
absolutely.
talking about in this podcast as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So managers or leaders of business that are a bit sort of strapped for cash.
Yeah.
Should really focus on these aspects to keep the team together, to keep the culture strong,
and learn the skills. You could go on YouTube, you could read books on these things, podcasts, and you could ChatGPT, what are great questions to ask my team about their development? And then you put in an hour's me separate from a performance review, because a lot of leaders will only do a career development discussion when it's linked with the performance review. I think it's a separate thing. I think it needs to be a separate conversation, and actually be interested, be curious, listen to them, and then help with the development. And it doesn't need to cost.
And it's very helpful to ask people, what are your hopes and aspirations?
Yeah, people want to feel like,
what do you want to do next? How do you see your career progressing? Because it's possible then to help them achieve their objectives if you know what they are.
Yeah, absolutely.
You don't, you can't. So I think that's very good advice. So, as a manager or leader in a business, when you spot someone that you feel has real potential and you want to sort of lift them up a bit and draw that out of them, how do you go about doing that in the most constructive way? What advice would you give people?
I think the first thing is not to make assumptions, because I see this a lot where I've had leaders say they've got real potential, I'm going to give them this role or that role, or that I'm going to give them. So firstly, you've got to actually have the conversation and say, and you say, look, I notice you've got great potential. What? And then ask them, how do you want to develop your career? What do you want? So it starts off as a conversation. So I think that's the first thing, not to make assumptions about people's desired career development just because you see it yourself. You want to test that assumption. Yes. And if they do then want to develop, and those assumptions are grounded and correct, then it's about thinking about ways together that you can stretch the development. So is it getting a mentor? Is it about a different project they could be working on that stretches them in their interest areas? Is it a leadership position or a promotion? There's a whole host of different things that you could do, but it's got to be from their interest and desires and what they want versus what you as a leader think that it should be. That has to be a joint discussion, because I have seen it where people push someone in a certain direction. It's just not where they want to go.
Right.
Even though they can see potential. So there may be ways to build confidence in that area. And it's about experimentation as well. So it's about, well, let's try this and see how that works. It may not work and actually might be a different direction or project that is the better one for that individual. But it's about not making assumptions, having the conversation about development, and finding ways that are going to stretch them, keep them challenged in whole host of different ways of doing that.
I suppose you need to find out whether they're motivated to do more as well,
whether
they have that sort of drive and ambition.
Kim Scott, who's CEO of, she was, I think, Google, Silicon Valley CEO, wrote a book called Radical Candor. And in that book, she talks about rock stars and superstars, I think. So, and rock stars are your people that, who are keep the business going, grounded in what they're doing. But they don't necessarily want that fast-paced career promotion development. And it's important and so that what they want is breadth of role to keep them interested. And where you've got your superstars who want to progress, they want to become the next leaders of the company. And so when she talks about development, don't assume everybody is a superstar and wants that fast growth, leadership development and responsibilities. Think about your rock stars. What's going to keep them motivated, fulfilled, and stay with the company as well?
Yeah, we find in recruitment that there are some recruiters who just want to carry on being fantastic recruiters, and we have a pathway for that. And others who might want to go into management, we have a pathway for that. And they're both of equal standing.
Yes, yeah.
I think it's important to give people the opportunity to go the way they want to go. Okay, and so is there anything, as a manager, we should be particularly tuned into if we're looking for potential? I mean, everyone is different. Everyone's sort of in different circumstances. But have you noticed anything we should be particularly tuned into? Because I think it's so important to spot potential.
The one common theme that I've seen when people are talking about potential in their teams is individuals who have a real desire to learn and improve. And where you've got that trait in someone, they can then do anything. And so I think that's the thing. If you've got someone who gets something on or is constantly seeking to improve, so they may not be the loudest voice. They may not be the most confident, But if
quite
they're
likely
constantly,
not to be, in fact.
Yes, But if they're constantly looking for improvement and learning, you see them learning and growing in what they're doing, I think that's a good indicator of potential.
That's very helpful. I'll remember that. Thank you very much, Steph. So the last two questions I'm going to ask you are questions I'm asking everyone.
Yeah.
So the first is, what gets you up on a Monday morning, Steph?
What gets me up on a Monday morning? The cats. That's the first thing. Actually, I've recently been doing some work where, we wake up in the morning, what's the first thought that you have in the morning? And rather than it be, I've got this to do, that to do. And gratitude is probably so when I wake up in the morning, I think about what am I really grateful for? And then the second thing I think is, what am I really looking forward to today? So it might be a client, it might be a piece of work that I'm doing, it might be just I'm having a nice cup of tea this morning. So the first thing I do is think about what am I grateful for? And then I think, what am I looking forward to today?
Thank you. And the second question is, where do you see yourself in 5 years' time? It's a classic interview question from the book, but where do you see yourself in 5 years' time?
I'd like to be continuing doing what I'm doing now, running the business, probably a bigger team, hitting our growth targets that we've set for ourselves, and continuously growing. And we've got global presence now, so continuing to expand the team and grow that. That would be my in 5 years' time. That's not too dissimilar to where I am now, but bigger and more people.
So growing the business.
Absolutely, yeah.
Thank you very much. That's perfect. Thank you to Steph for joining me on All About Business. If you'd like to find out more about Steph and driving results through people development, visit her website. The link is in the show notes. I'm your host, James Reed, Chairman and CEO of Reed, a family-run recruitment and philanthropy company. If you want to hire the best talent for your business, visit us at reed.com and speak to one of our specialist recruiters today. See you next time.